You're listening to Being Autistic. I'm your host, Shelly, and I am a 50-year-old woman sharing my experiences about what it's like to grow up knowing I was different but not knowing why, how I learned I was on the autism spectrum, and what it's like to be autistic. Hello, everyone. In this episode, I'm going to talk all about the double empathy problem. So I've heard this brought up a lot, and honestly, I didn't understand it until now, which is really quite crazy because the entire point of the double empathy problem is misunderstanding. And I did not understand it because I don't understand a lot of things. So let's get into exactly what the double empathy problem is. So, in a nutshell, what it means is that autistic people have difficulty fitting into society not only because they misunderstand others, but also because they are misunderstood by others. So basically, another way of putting it is that the double empathy problem is where autistic people have trouble understanding neurotypical people, and the opposite is also true. Neurotypical have people understanding autistic people. And this really kind of solidifies. What's the word I'm trying to say here? It really encapsulates the whole entire social communication issue that autistics have. And I'm going to go a little bit more into why and more details about that in a bit. But first, I wanted to give some examples in case you do not know what some examples would be of misunderstandings or, not fitting in because of how different you are. It's usually because of this double empathy problem. So it's not anyone's fault. I want to first say that because our brains are different and it's literally a miscommunication of the types of brains. So now let's get into I have 6 examples here. These are just off the top of my head that I've experienced and that I kind of did a little bit of research before I started recording so that I could know a little bit more about this. And that's when I learned exactly what this is. Like the whole phrase double empathy problem, I didn't really understand what it meant. And like I said, that's crazy because it's all about not understanding. But once I researched it and I realized it's very simple. It's literally not understanding people that are different. Like I said, it's nobody's fault. It goes both ways. So let's talk about, I've got these 6 examples here. The first one is an autistic person asking the question why something is. When you're having a conversation with a neurotypical person and you need to ask a question and you say, why? Why is it like that? Or why did you do this? Or why something? To us, we are needing more information. We need more clarification. We need to understand better. That is why we ask the question why. It's why 3-year-olds ask why all the time. They need to understand. And to a neurotypical person, they don't look at it that way. They think that we don't trust them or respect them, or we're questioning why they said what they said. And like I just mentioned, I feel like when we ask why, it's exactly the reason why a child would ask why. We honestly need to know the answer. We don't have any ulterior motives. And that's just one example. Another example of being misunderstood is the whole lack of eye contact thing. Neurotypicals misunderstand that. They think that when we don't look at them, it means that we're not interested. It means that we don't like them. It means that we don't want to talk to them. And none of those are true, usually. They can be true, and that's the thing with eye contact. A lot of autistic people struggle with the eye contact problem. And I can only say for me why I don't do it, and I think a lot of other people have the same reason, because our brains cannot look at a person's face while we are thinking. I mean, like I said, this is how I am. I need to look away. And I'm constantly looking away when I'm the one that's talking, but also sometimes when they're talking too. So if like, let's give an example of someone that might be intimidating to you. You might not be comfortable looking at them in the eyes. I kind of feel, I don't feel intimidated by a lot of people anymore. I did when I was young, and that's why I didn't look at people hardly ever. Like when I was a child, I don't remember looking into people's eyes. I was just doing my thing and not looking at them. I have forced myself to get good at, not good at it, but better at it as I've grown older. And that's part of masking, is forcing yourself to do eye contact when you don't feel comfortable with it. So it's a misunderstanding on both sides. Well, neurotypical people do not understand why we don't look at their faces. And like I just said, for me, my personal reason is it's just not comfortable. I can't think and look at their face at the same time. So I usually look at them when they're talking to me at least part of the time. Sometimes I look around the room. Sometimes I look at something that I'm doing. I look at my phone, but I'm still listening. And then when I answer, then I look around the room. Or I look up, if we're outside, I look up at the sky or the trees. I can articulate my thoughts so much better when I am not looking at someone's face. So that's a misunderstanding that they have, that they don't understand why we do that. The next one that I have here is making observations about things, and usually it's saying them out loud. So me, I do this all the time, and I don't understand again why most people don't react well to this, but I'm sorry, this is just how I am. I say things out loud that I observe, and I'm just thinking out loud. I'm observing things, and I'm kind of narrating what's happening. I don't always do it. I guess I do it mostly when I'm really comfortable being around certain people. Maybe I do it to fill the silence, but not always. There's different reasons. So like some examples would be, one time my mom and my brother were over and they were helping me fix my deck that was collapsed. And I was walking around saying a bunch of stuff like, hey, I have something here that might help, or can I do this, or I'm gonna do this, or look at this. I was just saying things. I was just observing things and saying them. And my mom and my brother would like ignore me. And that might be just because we're family, they don't have to answer everything I say, but it just made me realize how different I am from them. like I kind of sort of felt like I was trying to start a conversation, but not really. I was just trying to talk, and maybe neurotypical people don't know how to respond when we're just making observations or thinking out loud. I don't know. So that's one. Another one is the tone of voice that we take. So this can be misinterpreted by neurotypical people when I don't do it a whole lot in this podcast, but I do it at therapy all the time. I talk in a very flat, monotone voice, and I have read that that is a sign of autism. And also, when you talk either too loud or too quiet. And I have always talked too loud. In fact, this is not the first time during this recording that I thought, oh my gosh, am I talking too loud? Because I always do. Nobody has ever accused me of not being able to understand what I'm saying because I'm always talking so loud. They can always hear it perfectly. In fact, I've been told so many times that I need to talk quieter. So that's a misunderstanding that we have with neurotypicals. They think that if we are talking in a monotone voice that we're not interested, or that maybe they might think that we sound arrogant, because I kind of get that feeling that sometimes when I talk, just the way that I'm talking might appear that I'm trying to say something to make them believe it, or that I'm right, or that I'm trying to say something that they should listen to or understand. So they kind of might feel like they don't like the way that we talk in that sense. And so that's all about tone of voice. And I don't believe that we can really change that unless we really focus on it and try. And I've worked really hard at changing my monotoneness, especially when I'm talking on videos or podcasts. That's kind of a different thing, but this doesn't really go for every conversation either, because I've had conversations where I've gotten very animated and my voice would go up and down a lot and I was really excited and happy, and that's a different situation. But I think if it's a situation where it's kind of a serious conversation, it might come off as, they might think that we're disinterested, or I'm struggling to find the words to explain this, like how I think neurotypicals would think that we are being with the way that we talk. So basically, yeah, there's a lot of ways that our voices can be misunderstood. Another example of a misunderstanding would be vague instructions. This is not just instructions, but vagueness in general, but I have experienced this a lot with instructions. And I've seen neurotypical people make plans with each other, and I listen to them talking and I'm like, there's so much openness in that. There's so much vagueness. Like, how do they know? They didn't even say a specific time, or they didn't say a specific place, or they didn't say what part of the place they were going to be waiting for them, or, something like that. And when it comes to instructions, like, I don't know how many times at jobs I've had where the boss would say how to do something, or what to do, I should say, what to do, but they completely left out so many details. And I can't even think of one example right now because it's happened so much. And this, I've noticed when I'm having conversations with neurotypical people, it makes me feel like to me, it feels like their brain isn't giving all the right information. But from their end, they're probably looking at me going, why do you need more information? It's such a mismatch of communication there, where we need so many more details. And this comes along too with when autistic people talk, we give way more details than they want us to give for the most part. And like, I've found myself going on and on and on, and this is for talking and for writing and typing on the internet. I will type full paragraphs of 6, 7, 8 sentences, and then I'm like, why do they only respond with one sentence? Or the other way around, they ask a simple question and I give a detailed answer, and then they act like that's all, they don't need to ask any other questions. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, I don't know, I feel like I have weird imbalances all the time with people where I'm giving more information than they need, or I think they need it but they don't think they need it. I mean, that's really what it is. That's why, that's kind of the same as info dumping, only it's a communication thing where the more the better. I would think the more information the better. So it kind of makes me feel weird when I hear neurotypical people talking to each other. And I'm going, there's so much vagueness in there. Like, how do you know what else is going on? I don't know. So that's one example. So now the last example is, we get misunderstood a lot when we do not take initiative for things such as contacting people or making plans or saying hello. That is not our strong suit. We don't really think of those things. And a great example of this, which happens to me all the time, is, one of my friends on the internet always says, how come you never ask how I'm doing or never say hi first? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking about it at that moment. And then I feel like a bad person. But really, my brain isn't, I don't think of things that aren't in my main point of my field of vision. When I'm home on the computer, I think of whatever's on my screen at the moment. I think of whatever's in front of me. I don't think about, I do think about people. Like, I think about her and I'm like, oh, I wonder how she's doing and I wonder what's new with her. But I don't take initiative to go out of my way and stop what I'm doing and send her a message. And that might sound cold and to some people, but that's an example of how we are different and how the double empathy thing is, they don't understand why we're not initiating contact, and we don't understand why they need us to initiate contact, because she always does. So I just wait for her to do it and then we talk. So to me, there's no problem there, and that's just how we both interact. So that's another example. And that's, now that you kind of know what I mean, you probably have lots of things like this in your life that you have experienced. Sometimes it might be something that you can't even put your finger on, but you just don't understand why there seems to be a miscommunication there. So now I'm going to talk about some things that I learned about the double empathy problem on a website. It's actually not an autism website. It's called frontiersin.org. So like frontiers in whatever the thing is. It's kind of like a scientific website. It's really about like studies and scientific information. So they did an article about autistic people and the misunderstandings that we experience and the whole double empathy problem. So I learned a lot of really, really interesting things about this. And the first thing I'm going to say is I already knew this part. I already read this somewhere else, but this is true. When people who are not autistic meet someone who is autistic and they don't understand them, and they can usually tell within a few seconds, they will form a negative first impression and they will tend to like that person less. I've read this in more than one place, and it would explain a lot. Like, I know people even in my family that, well, not my mom, dad, brother, but like extended family, like people that get married to my family, or, when they meet me, they often just act like they don't like me, but I don't know why, and it was from day one. And that would totally make sense, because a few seconds into meeting someone, they're going to already give us, a negative first impression because they don't understand us. They can tell we're different. And I'm sure you've all experienced that if you are autistic. And this literally is why we don't have a lot of friends, why we don't have a lot of good mutual connections with people. It's always unbalanced. So I talk a little bit more about that kind of thing in my friendship episode, where I struggled with friendships. And so, yeah, I've experienced that a lot in my life, where people just meet me and then eventually they just like me less and less. Another thing that website said, this is really cool too. When neurotypical people read the words of what autistic people are saying, in other words, when they can see our printed words, our typed words, like on the internet, they do not judge them any differently than they judge other neurotypical people. So it really seems that this is how autistic people appear and sound, not what they talk about. So it's all about being in person with that person. It's not just the words themselves on a screen. So yeah, it really is how we appear and how we sound that makes them judge us and avoid us. It's not the actual information. And I've internalized this so much in my life. I've talked about things on like my interests, and I'll just say something about it, when I'm with somebody and they literally have no interest at all in talking about that. Like, okay, I want to talk about this thing. Can't we talk about this thing that I'm excited about? But they don't want to. They just don't really want to. They want to talk about stuff that they want to talk about. But then when I'm on the internet and I say those things, everybody's like, yes, I understand, I love it, I agree, let's talk about this. It's completely different. So it's all about the written word and then the spoken word. We're just, when people are around us in person, it makes it different. I hope you understand what I'm getting at there. Another thing that I wanted to mention that this website talked about was they are actually doing studies on this double empathy problem. So in one study, they learned that what it was when two people met, when they got to know each other by talking for a few minutes, they would do studies on these people. And sometimes the two adults were neurotypical, sometimes they were both autistic, sometimes there was one of each. So based on what we've been told, that we are bad at social interaction, you would expect that the conversations between the two autistic people would go really badly, you would think, because if two people that are poor at communication are trying to talk, it would probably turn out badly. But that is not what the study found. I find this so interesting. The quality of the interactions between the two autistic people was just as strong as between two people who are neurotypical. It's autistic people even shared more information about themselves with the other autistic people, which suggests that they felt more comfortable with them. And I've heard this said many times, that autistic people can often pick out other autistics. They're kind of drawn to each other. This shows that, this study that proves this, it just proves that autistic people are just like everyone else, and that they find it easier to connect with people who think and communicate like they do. So I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like to say, oh, it's us versus them, we're all so different than them, we need to find what we have in common. But we really do have this difference that we need to acknowledge. Like, it's so obvious that we think differently, we communicate differently. And this study just proves that it's not even at all that we're bad at communicating. We're just bad at communicating with people that are not thinking and communicating like we do. So this is good. This is all good, I think. And hopefully, hopefully, like, in the future, things can improve in the sense of neurotypical people learning how this is. And it takes so much education and so much awareness. There's so many people out there that don't understand, and it's the whole reason I'm making this episode is to get people to understand what this double empathy problem is, and that it's not anybody's fault per se. It's just that we have to learn other people's communication styles and thinking styles. And once you learn them, you will not judge them. Once you learn them, you will not judge. What was the other word I was going to use? I just totally blanked. Misunderstand. You will not misunderstand people if you can understand them, obviously. But I know this is a lot easier said than done because, I'm getting better at it. So if I'm getting better at it, other people should be able to get better at it too. So yeah, I'm curious if anybody listening has any examples that they want to share about ways that you have experienced communication issues, not understanding someone and having them not understand you. But then, the answer is to accept them anyway. And I struggle with this. I know I need to work on this because sometimes I think the world would be so much easier for me if all the autistic people lived in the same city or the same state or the same country. And then everywhere we go, we would have amazing connections and understandings with these people. We wouldn't have to worry about it. But it's just like the world, and it's a good metaphor for the world in general. We need to be more accepting of differences. We need to understand the differences and accept the differences. This goes for anything in life, people's sexual orientation, animals, and that's why autistic people connect with animals so much, because I feel like we can relate to them in many ways. And what made me think of that was a cat just walked by outside, and I'm like, oh, there was one of the neighborhood cats. I love watching the cats walk around. They just wander around freely by themselves, and they just live how they instinctually want to live. They don't have social obligations, and they understand other animals without needing to speak. Ugh, that's just such a beautiful thing. And I wish that humans could be that way. And sometimes I think we can be in some ways. I've had experiences with other humans where, we've had this mutual feeling together without even having to talk. And that usually happens at concerts and festivals and stuff like that, where you're both so enjoying the music so much, and you know exactly how that person feels in that moment. And you don't need to talk. And you both know that you both love this music, and that's all it takes, And so I think humans can be like animals a little bit in that sense. I realize that I'm going off on a tangent here. I'm kind of just going in any direction that I can think of right now. I think I pretty much said what I wanted to say, and we're getting close to the half-an-hour point. So like I said, if you want to leave a comment on my YouTube channel, where I post these episodes on there too. So find my website. I usually put the link in my show notes. So you can talk to other autistic people and share your experiences, because number one, we need to share our experiences with each other. This is the best therapy in the world for autistic people. I don't know where I would be without other people saying that they experienced the same thing, and they didn't know how to describe what they're feeling, but they feel the same thing that I do. And likewise, I hear other people talk about their experiences, and I'm like, yes, I know what you're saying. And that type of understanding just doesn't happen with neurotypical people and us. It's really like its own language. And that was where I was kind of going with the whole animal thing. Animals have their own language. Children have their own language with each other. But then, autistic people have their own language, and neurotypical people have theirs. And the whole entire world has, I don't know how many languages there are in the world, but isn't it cool to think? There's probably hundreds of them, or thousands of them maybe. I wish that we could all speak the same language, but when we don't, it's really cool to find ways to connect. I have met people that don't speak English very well, and it was really cool when we could finally get on the same page about something. Like, they know the basic words, and, it comes down to the same thing I just said about music, You don't need to talk. You can both enjoy an experience. You can both feel a connection without having to talk. And so, yep. I'm going to end this episode now, and thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week.